Maybe you're going to struggle every single day of your life with the situation that you have. Maybe you wouldn't yell at your kids, but do you gossip at all the girls? Okay? Maybe you wouldn't wear those things, but it's so true. It's like, what do people say about Christians? You're so judgmental. As we progress in our relationship with Christ, our lives will change. And now, instead of judging, when you believe the Bible and the Bible alone, I said, that's what we live for, is just this one. Okay, welcome to those of you that are watching us online, DirecTV, Roku, apps, however you found us. We're glad that you're joining us today. And if you want to know more about our ministry, you can go to womensbiblestudy.com, and that's where you can find everything. The handouts are online, back lessons are online. You could watch lots and lots of things from the past, so that's where you find us on there. Okay, so I always tell you what happened this week. I have, most of you know, I'm the worst grandmother around. Okay, we've already distinguished that, so we understand that. So our son and daughter-in-law and our 2 grandchildren moved in with us for 10 days, okay? So my house is now like it has toys all over it. And I realized how exhausting children are. I mean, it's like, okay, so here's what we do. So I wanted to show you that I'm a really good grandmother all of a sudden, okay? So the other night, they go to small group on Monday night. So because we don't babysit, because we tell them, like, we're not babysitting, even though they're living in our house, they hired a babysitter. And finally, when I realized this, I was like, honey, we can watch the kids for a couple hours. So Cheyenne is usually their babysitter, so she, when she found out that I was going to be in charge of the kids, she came over. And so I said, well, what's the problem? Like, I'm a good grandmother. We're going to build gingerbread houses. Look at this. Okay, our masterpiece. And this is like something that we did. I think Cheyenne and I had way more fun than anybody else, and now I know how to make a gingerbread house. Kind of the cutest thing ever. And then Tenley, she's almost 4. She's so stinking cute, and she loves cupcakes. So Rob said, go get them really cute cupcakes. Look at this. It melted. Look, it's an Elmo cupcake. Is that the cutest thing ever? I know. I was like, so now we have all that stuff around the house, and then I eat it. Apparently, someone asked me how my diet was going, and I said, what diet? You can't diet when you have kids around the house. Somebody did bring me, though. Remember I whined last week about Butterfingers? Someone brought me Butterfingers today. It's kind of super exciting. Okay, so here's what I learned about having children over at the house. We had no toys, basically, so had to go buy some Barbies. Remember I told you my dog ate my shoes? Well, he apparently eats Barbies. Barbie now has no arms and no feet, okay? And he ate her head in half, okay? So I was walking through the house and I said, oh, new Barbie line. We can call it the Walking Dead Barbie line. My kids watch The Walking Dead. I'm like, that's the grossest show ever. So, okay, let's see if our, so speaking of cupcakes, I found this online. So let's see if that made it on our little thing. Once you lick the frosting off a cupcake, it becomes a muffin. And muffins are healthy. You're welcome. I'm like, I love that. That's so awesome. Cheyenne was so cute. Cheyenne has a new boyfriend. She's not here today, so I can talk about her. She has a new boyfriend. Like, we totally love him. He's like the most awesome kid ever. So she bought him a new pair of shoes, like tennis shoes that tie, and so she was so excited. So she wrote him a card, and it said, okay, I got to read this. She said, can I tie your shoes so you don't fall for anyone else? Aw, that's so cute. I'm like, that's the cutest thing ever. Okay, now we will actually talk about Bible. That would be a novel idea. Since people are like, oh, this is a Bible study. How about maybe I can turn my phone off and then it won't ring. Hang on. Okay, we are on a series called Life is a Battle. We're studying the life of Joshua. And the reason why we're doing this is because life is a battle. We've determined that. And what we're doing is we're going to start with our little map here. We do this all the time, every time we start, so that you understand what's going on here. Moses got the Israelites out of Egypt. They wandered around the wilderness for 40 years, and now they are getting ready to go into the promised land, and it's the land of Israel, modern-day Israel, and that God had promised them hundreds and hundreds of years before. Now, you're talking 1 million to 2 million people. If you see the body of water to the bottom, It's the Dead Sea. The body of the water at the top is the Sea of Galilee. The Jordan River runs even farther up north down there. So right now they're on the east side. The problem is that they are getting ready for the battle of their life, because what happens now is the whole entire land of Israel back then was occupied by very wicked and evil people. And so now they have to cross this Jordan, and then they have to start attacking people and taking back over the land. So it's a battle. And so why we named this series this is because the battles that they face are kind of like what we face. They're things that are terrifying, that I don't know how I'm going to make it through this. And some of you understand that. You have health problems, you have relational problems, your husband just walked out the door, your kids are on drugs, whatever. Whatever it is that comes into your life, it's a battle. Okay? And we want to see how the Israelites handled that when they did that. Now, good communicators, from what I understand, they give you a lesson and then they tell you 1 point for the entire lesson. I apparently am not a very good communicator because we're going to have about 3 or 4 points today, so it should be a fun day. I think we'll learn a lot. It's, like I said, one of my favorite lessons just because we get to learn super duper fun stuff. Okay, so let's talk about where we were last week. Last week, they were on the east side of the Jordan River. Joshua sent 2 spies into Jericho. They kind of get the lay of the land, figure out what's going on. He goes over there, comes back, and so we're going to pick up the story right there in verse 23. So the 2 men descended from the mountain, passed over the Jordan, and came to Joshua, son of Nun, told him all that had befallen him. They said to Joshua, "Truly the Lord has given all the land into our hands, for the inhabitants of the country are faint because of us." Now, I have 1 point that I want to make for this whole section here, and this is what it is. Think about this. You've got a fortified, huge city. Okay, huge walls, fighting people. They know how to fight. They've been there for a long time. And suddenly there's this group of 1 million, maybe 2 million, I don't know, on their way. They're wandering nomads. They don't know how to fight. The majority of them are women and children. And suddenly this town of Jericho is just panic-stricken because of this group of people. And that just doesn't happen normally. And so I would beg to say that the reason why is our first point today, and it's this. God is the one who changes the hearts and minds of people. And God is the one who put the fear of God, basically, into the people at Jericho and actually the surrounding areas to be so fearful of this group. But the problem is they didn't know how to fight. They didn't know anything. But the thing is that when God decides to change someone's heart and mind, it's a really big deal. And it's something that I think if we learn that today, it will completely change everything about our life. Because there's some of us here that think that we need to, if we're trying to get our own way, or we're trying to change our husband's mind, or our kid's mind, or we're trying to change our boss's mind, or the teacher's mind, or whatever, we tend to do a lot of things. We cry, we connive, we argue, we convince, and we stress ourselves out because we just so need to change your mind. But here what we're going to learn today is that you don't have to do that anymore, okay? Because God is the one that takes the heart and minds of a person and changes it for us. Now, our deal is that we need to pray and ask him to do that. And the question is there a biblical basis for this? And I'm going to show you where there is. We're going to start in Proverbs 21:1. This verse says, "The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, as are the watercourses. He turns it whichever way he wills." Now, I want you to put your name in that. That Lisa's heart is in the hand of the Lord. He turns it however he wants. My husband Rob's heart is in the hand of the Lord. God turns it however he wants. This isn't just for kings. This is for all of us. And it's really, really good news. The other night, he's in basketball, but he's not really in basketball because he hurt his knee and he can't play. So he's doing some stuff with the team. And I couldn't sleep the other night because it was really stressing me out. And I laid there in bed and I'm thinking, I'm not happy about this part and I need to go talk to Rob about it. But if I do, Rob thinks this way about it. And so I felt, for an hour laying in bed thinking, this isn't going to work. And finally I said, whoa. I just need to pray that God will change Rob's heart before I talk to him, or mine. And that's for us women, that's kind of a big thing, because we always think we're right. Look how cute this must have been a bathroom stall thing, I don't know if David, yeah, there you go. Men to the left, because women are always right. Look at this next one, this was so funny. "No, you're right," said no woman ever. I thought that was great. But that's the truth. But I think we have to come to the point of saying, God, would you change whoever you need to change, or change me? Okay, so that's what we got to do. Now go to Exodus 10. I'm going to show you all the different verses that show this. Then the Lord said to Moses, go into Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, that I may show these signs of mine among them. I have hardened his heart. Now think about that. God takes full responsibility of hardening someone's heart or softening someone's heart. And the thing that we do as a Christian is our job to go to him and say, God, I can't change the situation, but I know you can. And you're going to have to step in and change the hearts of people. Look at Jeremiah. It's all over the Bible. Look at Jeremiah 59. For I will stir up and bring against Babylon, which actually is modern day Iraq, an alliance of great nations from the land of the north. Now think about that. God says, I am going to take the nation of Iraq, which back then it was called Babylon. I'm going to take all these surrounding nations and I'm going to stir up the leaders to come against Iraq, or Babylon at the time. And so see, we look at the news today and we think, what is going on? And what's going on with Russia? And what's going on with Iran and Iraq? And why does the world seem so crazy? And I believe it's because God is stirring up the hearts of the leaders for, we always say we're on a train track to the end. But we can look at that and say, that's God that's doing that, instead of like, oh my gosh, what's happening in the news and everything's falling apart. We can look back and say, God, he says, takes full responsibility for doing that. Look at Haggai 1:14. So the Lord stirred up the spirit of Zerubbabel. Judges 13, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him while he was in Mahana. 2 Chronicles 21:16, and the Lord stirred up against Jerome. So you see, all through the Bible, it's the Lord stirred, the Lord stirred, the Lord stirred. And for some reason, that's really, really exciting news for us. Now, the last one, Ezra 1:1, I want to talk about for a second, because this was so fascinating to me. Do you remember when we studied Jeremiah in our Discouraged series? And the whole reason why Jeremiah came on the scene was because the Israelites, they're getting ready to go into the land. When they eventually get in there, they're going to turn away from God. And so God commissioned Jeremiah to come in and preach to all of the Israelites and say, look, you need to turn back to God. It's time to repent. And if you don't, then the Babylonians are going to come in, they're going to capture you all and take you away for 70 years. Now, this verse in Ezra, look at here. It says, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia. Now think about it. They'd captured the Israelites for 70 years. And Jeremiah said, in 70 years, you're going to come back home. Cyrus, the king of Persia, suddenly, like one day woke up and said, wow, maybe we should let the Jewish people come back. Not only that, maybe we should let them build a temple. That's a really great idea. Where did that come from? God, okay, but he didn't know that because he wasn't even a follower of God. But see, that's how big and awesome and powerful our God is. And it's so fun when we can get that, because then suddenly we look at all of our surrounding people. We don't have to like stress and fret and cry and carry on any longer. We just pray. Say, God, I need you to change his heart on this. God, I need you to prepare him for him to say. God, those are the things that we get to do, and it's so super duper fun. Okay, now I'm going to tell you a story which I've told you before. And I want you to know ahead of time that I'm telling you this not because I have Alzheimer's, although that is a strong possibility that that's coming sooner than later, okay? But I do know that I've told you the story before. But because we have so many new viewers all the time, they probably haven't heard it. So you can just either tune out for 1 minute and think like what you're going to have for lunch, wonder if I'm going to bring you more peanut M&Ms next week, whatever. But here it is. And this was the first time I ever understood that God changes hearts. I never knew that. Like, no one ever told me that. And it changed my life. So when we used to have money, Rob decided one day that he wanted to buy a place in Montana, because he thought fly fishing was so much fun. And so he wanted to buy a place that had our own little river, and we could fly to Montana, and he could fly fish and do all those guy things, okay? And so we flew up there, and we found a place, and we put money down on it. And after we did that, we came back home, and I will tell you, I never felt comfortable. Every time I thought about it made me sick. I'm like, this is just wrong. Nothing's right about it. I just did not feel good about it. So finally I went to Rob and I said, Rob, I'm not comfortable with this. And he's like, Lisa, we put non-refundable money down. And it was a lot of it at the time. And he said, this is ridiculous for us to give up that kind of money and not buy the place. Rob, I don't feel good about it. The day we're supposed to make a decision, at the time, our office was on one side of the wall, our bedroom was on the other. I'm in bed reading my Bible. He's on the other side of the office reading his Bible. And I'm praying. And I realized, God, I'm miserable. I don't even know what to do. I can't make him change his mind. And I said, God, would you change his mind? I don't know what to do. And literally 5 minutes later, he walked around the corner and he said, I think God just spoke to me and said that we shouldn't buy the place in Montana. Okay, and I'm thinking, it's that simple? Like, how did I never know this? I would have been praying for the last 20 years. But for some reason, no one ever told me that. And so today I want that to be the first thing that you know, that God is that big and powerful. He's the one who takes hearts and minds and just flips them and changes it. Our son, when he went away to college, he left here thinking he wanted to be in the ministry. Instead, he decided to go and join a fraternity, and he just did stupid stuff, and it just went on from there. He decides he wants this girlfriend. He brings her home. The minute we see her, we're like, oh, she's so not working with his family. She's not a believer, and she was just, okay, this is going to sound really tacky. Anyone that walks out like to their new mother, whatever, braless and a t-shirt. Okay, that was just, I'm like, serious? You dress like that in front of me? Like, I don't do that. So anyway, she was just kind of, that's what we always tell the kids, like if it wasn't going to work, we're just like, not going to work. But anyway, he didn't want to listen. He's like, oh no, love her. She's everything. I'm like, oh no. We cried, connived, carried on, did all those things, and nothing worked. Until one day, it was like God took this switch and just flipped it, and it was the day of graduation from college. And he walked into her and he said, we can't be together anymore. He came home, found the girl he was to marry, and we love her. So, but only God can do that. Like, there's nothing in me, like I can't beg someone to do something. So I thought that was a really, really good story. I also talked to a lady a couple months ago. She was telling me how her husband had an affair and came in one day and said, I've been having an affair and I want a divorce. And it just blew her right out of the water. But she said, I didn't do anything for like 9 months. And then one day, it was like God flipped the switch in her husband, and he came in and said, I'm so sorry. I want to make this work. And they've been happily married for the last 20 years. So God is really good at flipping that switch, but it takes us to just pray and trust that he will. Okay, 9 months is a long time to wait going, God, what's happening with my life? Okay, but that's what God's specialty is. Now, I want to talk to those of you that pray and know that God is going to change someone's heart, but then God doesn't, okay, because that does happen too, and I want to talk to you about that for a second. I look at Saeed, who's in prison in Iran. As everybody knows in the news, we have the guy in Mexico. His mom's been praying that they would let him out. It takes one government official for God to just flip that switch and say, you know what, we need to release him, whatever. It's not even a big government thing. That's just God. He'll just go in, change someone's heart, change everyone's heart, just like he hardened Pharaoh's heart and softened Pharaoh's heart. That's just how God works. My question is, why in the world won't you do that with Saeed? It takes one government official in Iran to just go, yeah, this is too big of a deal. Let's just let him out, whatever. It's not happening. And that's really frustrating to me. I look at, I have a friend of mine that called the other day and she said, you're not going to believe this. My husband walked in and said he wants a divorce. So I said, okay, we're going to pray. We're going to pray that God just changes his heart. And as of now, it's not happening. And it's harder and harder and harder. And it's just the weirdest thing. But sometimes that happens. And the reason why is I think this. When we were at the cabin one time when we first had our first daughter-in-law, and Rob was making coffee, and she went up to grab the coffee, and he turned around, he goes, it's not ready yet. And we always laugh about it because she was just like, oh, okay. They're cute when they're first daughter-in-laws. Well, they're always cute now, but they're cute. She just didn't know what to think about that. But it dawned on me that that's what happens with God. Saeed being in prison, it's not ready yet. Okay, God is not done with using Saeed in prison before it's ready. It's kind of like if you put a casserole in or a meatloaf in. You don't want to take it out too early. It's not ready. It'll be disgusting and gross. And that's what happens with God. Sometimes he says, I'm not turning his heart because I have a bigger purpose than what you can see. And that's something we need to know. My little friend whose husband's walking out, we're praying and praying and praying. But you know what? God may say, I've got a different plan for your life. And sometimes we have to accept when God says no. So the great news is don't stress, pray, trust, wait, and let God do what he needs to do. And if he doesn't change your husband's heart, then say, okay, God, change mine. Sometimes, like I said, sometimes we can be wrong. I know that's kind of shocking. Okay, let's talk about, back to Joshua. Now, when Joshua hears that these people are so frightened of them, I think he just ramped his faith up. I think he just went, really, God? They're afraid of us? I can't even believe that. This is so cool. And so what it did is it made him to see God as even bigger than God really is. And I think that's what happens, and that's why we always say to read your Bible. Read these stories in the Bible, because when you do, it's like, if God could do that for Joshua, he can do that for me. And it gives us hope for our future. So I always say the first lesson today is this. This is number 1 on our 3, is quit stressing. Quit stressing that you have to change someone's mind. Pray, trust, wait, and sit back and relax, and quit fussing about the whole thing, okay? Because you don't need to do that. And I realize that that's how easy it is to be a Christian. It just is that easy to be a Christian. It's like, God, you're in control of my life, you're in control of my mind, my husband's mind, whoever I need to change. You're that awesome. All right, let's go on to Joshua 3, verse 1, and we'll just continue on there. And we're going to go through 2 pieces in here that you may never know anything about it. Joshua rose early in the morning, and they removed from Shittim and came into Jordan, he and all the Israelites, and lodged there before passing over. After 3 days, the officers went through the camp, commanding the people, when you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God being borne by the Levitical priest, set out from where you are and follow it. Now, this next section for the next 5 or 6 minutes will have nothing to do with your everyday life. You're going to be like, oh, I need something that will help me live my life today. Nope, this isn't going to do it. But this is going to teach you something really cool about the Bible, because I want us to get this 30,000-foot view of the Bible so that when we read it, we'll be like, oh, I know what that means. Oh, I know who they are. So I want to talk first about the Levitical priests so that you understand who they are. These are the guys that carried the Ark of the Covenant. And so I want to go to the genealogy that you guys have in there, and I want to show you how this whole system works. Abraham at the very top, of course, married Sarah. God promised Abraham a people group, which is the Jewish people, the Israelites, as we are talking about them now. They had a son named Isaac. Isaac had Jacob. As you can see, Jacob has 12 sons down there and looks like 1 daughter, Dinah. Now, if you look at, you've got Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, all of those. Now, if you look below Joseph, there's 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And what happens is that Jacob adopted Joseph's 2 boys. So if you take Joseph out, put those 2 boys up there, now you have 13 tribes, but there's only 12. So what happens is the third guy over, Levi, what happens with them is they have a completely different job. Now, if you look at this map, the next map that comes up, you'll see that this is the land of Israel. As you can see, the Dead Sea and the Jordan River. And you see each one of those kids has a piece of the property when they get in there. So Manasseh was a huge tribe, apparently. You've got Ephraim, Gad, Judah. They all have pieces of land. So when they get into the land, that's going to be their homeland for their descendants. So that's how that all plays out. But the Levites do not have a piece of that land, because what they are is they're kind of like the priests. They're like the pastors. They're like the people who take care of the church. They're the ones who sacrifice the animals for you. That was their job. So they didn't have an actual place. They would just wander around all the different places. They didn't have an actual homeland. Now, before we're at the place we are today, where they're waiting to cross the Jordan, they have now been wandering the wilderness for 40 years. And during those 40 years, think about it, you're talking 2 million people, so there has to be some kind of assembly going on so that people know who's who and where they're all going to stay. Now, what God told them to do was build something called a tabernacle. So for those 40 years, here's a picture of what that looks like. Hopefully it's in there. Now, this is what God told them to build. The tabernacle was really kind of a dwelling place for the presence of God. And the purpose there was so that they could sacrifice animals and the priests could do all their stuff. And I want you to picture around the tabernacle were all those people groups, in their different areas. Now, there's 2 pieces of equipment right there. You've got an altar and a basin, and we're going to talk about that for a second. But look at the next slide real quick. This is how it was set up. So whenever the Israelites stopped, God said, set up the tabernacle in the middle. Then you have 4 boxes around there. Those are all the all the Levites, because they had to take care of the tabernacle. And then you have, all the different people groups, Dan and Asher, and that's how they set up every time they would move during this 40 years. Now, what they did, the descendants of Levi, that was their job, to take care of the tabernacle. Now, the question that everyone always asks is, why does the Old Testament seem so different than the New Testament? Like, they just seem like God seems mean over here, and there's all this sacrificing animals, but then God seems so loving here, and then you have Jesus, and I'm kind of confused, so we're going to take all the confusion out. The tabernacle and most of the Old Testament actually points to Jesus. It points to a time when Jesus is going to come. And the tabernacle is the perfect explanation of how that works. If you look right there at the very bottom left down here, that is called the bronze altar. And what happens is in Romans 3:23, the Bible says that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. You and I, when we're born, we're like born into sin. We're born automatically separated from God. Some people don't like to hear it, but that's just kind of the way it is. So all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Now, the problem is that the Bible continues to say that the wages of sin is death, which is separation from God. So you and I are born, we're separated from God. Now, how am I going to get to God? Now, back in the days of when the tabernacle was here, look at what Leviticus 17:11 says. The life of each creature is in its blood. So I have given you the blood of animals to pay for your sin on the altar. Blood is life. That is why blood pays for your sin. So the Levitical priests, their job was to go to that altar, get a perfect lamb, kill him, take the blood, put it onto the altar, and that would pay for the Israelite sins. Now, what that does is it foreshadows what Jesus is going to do for us. Because Jesus comes along in the New Testament, and what we're going to find out is that he is the perfect lamb. When he dies, crucified, he does that once and for all, and we never have to go back to the old sacrificial system that they had to do here. It's kind of fascinating. Now, near the bronze altar, the next little piece is a little basin, and what that symbolizes is that man has to be very pure and clean before he comes in front of a holy God. So a priest would sacrifice the animal, then they'd have to go wash in the basin before they could even enter into the covered tabernacle part. And that foreshadowed that time when Jesus died on the cross for us, paid his blood. When we accept Jesus, we now become pure and holy in the sight of God. And that's how easy it is to become a Christian. It's like, God, would you just take my sins, and I just want to come to you and have Jesus come in my life. And then you're a Christian, and then you move on from there. It's kind of a good thing. Now, inside that tabernacle, I put a little picture of there, and you'll kind of see, because this is fascinating to me. What happens when you get in there? There's all these little things that we're not going to talk about, but you can see that big curtain. This is like looking down into it. There's a huge big curtain that divides. Now, behind that curtain is what's called the Holy of Holies. And that is where the presence of God comes in. So now, and no one's allowed back there except the priest, the high priest. Once a year, he's allowed to go back there. He has to wash himself and put on these clothes and do all this stuff because he's the only one that will be able to do that. And it actually is still what they do today. The Jewish people, they celebrate Yom Kippur, which is exactly the Day of Atonement, which is what that signifies there. Now, inside, you've got that curtain, and I want to show you, because that curtain shielded sinful man from a holy God. And it's kind of this barrier, Old Testament barrier that says, look, there's a big division between God and man, okay? But look what happens, and I'm going to tell you this is the coolest thing in the whole world. Fast forward to, you're in the wilderness. Now once the Israelites get into the land, now Solomon, King David, and then Solomon builds a huge temple. In this temple, same thing. Holy of Holies, the bronze altar, all the same things are in the Solomon's temple. Now the Babylonians come in, destroy the temple, burn the whole thing down, take all the artifacts and take them someplace else. At the time of Jesus, Herod comes on the scene. Herod decides to build Herod's temple. And he did it to appease the Jewish nation at that particular time. And so what they did was they built the same thing. There's the curtain in there, the same thing. The Levitical priests would go in. They would have to, wash themselves and sacrifice for animals and do all the goofy things for sin that they did back then. But I want to show you this verse, and it's the coolest thing ever. Matthew 27:50. Jesus is hanging on the cross. He's just about ready to die, and look what happens. When Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. At that moment, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Okay? This was not a man going in and tearing it. It was God saying the minute Jesus died on the cross, he once and for all paid for our sins. God took that curtain and ripped it from the top to the bottom, which said now you and I have perfect access to God. Isn't that like the coolest thing? Like, I don't know why that excites me so much. I don't know why. I think it's the coolest thing ever. Okay, now, let's talk about, so basically now, we don't have to worry about not being able to get to God. All we have to do is come to Christ, and now we can go into the presence of God. Now, inside the Holy of Holies, that little space in the back, there was something called the Ark of the Covenant. If you have ever seen the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark, that is what they're looking for. And frankly, they're still looking for it today. Now, the thing is, when they were wandering around in the wilderness, God told them to build this box. They had to carry it a certain way. Inside of it was held the 10 Commandments. So when they were wandering around in the wilderness, the Ark of the Covenant always went with them, was stored in the back of the Holy of Holies, and that was what that was. Now, they carried that into battles whenever there was a battle, because what God wanted to show them is that, look, when you have the Ark of the Covenant with you, that means that I am present with you. I want you always to know that. That means that I have never left you, okay? So what happens now is we're back to crossing the Jordan. Now look back at that verse, verse 2? After 3 days, the officers went through the camp, commanding the people, when you see the Ark of the Covenant, now you know why that's important, of the Lord your God being borne by the Levitical priest. So now if anyone ever asks you, like, what's the Ark of the Covenant? You're like, I'm going to know the answer to that now. And who are Levitical priests? And now you know that too. So it's very exciting. Now, it was just a reminder that God was going to lead the way. And if anybody wants to know what happened to the Ark of the Covenant after the Babylonians came in, took all the artifacts out of the temple, they burned the temple down to the ground. No one's ever seen it since. Now, I put a picture in there of Israel as it stands today. This is the Temple Mount. As you can see, that is the exact place where Solomon's temple was, Herod's temple was. This is where Jesus did all of his ministry in Jerusalem. The problem is that Muslims took over a piece of this. That is the Muslims' dome on the rock right there. They will not let anybody underneath, and they feel that there's lots and lots of secret rooms underneath archaeologically. They can't do any digs there because the Muslim community will not let them in. So nobody knows where the Ark of the Covenant is. So who knows? Okay. Whew, that was a lot of information that you never even asked for. Okay, let's go back to now. He said the Ark of the Covenant. Let's go back to verse 4. So he tells them, take the Ark of the Covenant and go and follow it. And then he says this. Yet a space must be kept between you and it, about 2,000 cubits by measure. Come not near it, that you may be able to see the ark and know the way you must go, for you have not passed this way before. Here they're getting ready to go on a path they've never been before. And I think some of you get that, because some of you are right there. You are being sent on a journey in your life that you've never been before. And frankly, you're scared to death. Life changes, kids change, health change, marriage change, everything changes in life. And God takes you on a path and you're sitting there going, God, I've never been down this road before, and I don't even know what I'm going to be able to do with this. And God says, here's the deal. Just like I told the Israelites to focus on the Ark of the Covenant, I want you to focus on me. And that's what God wants us to do. When our lives change, this is a good reminder to us that says, look, keep your eye on him, because that's how we're going to get through what we have to go through. Now, verse 5. And Joshua said to the people, sanctify yourselves, that is, separate yourselves for a special holy purpose, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders in your sight. Now, the point I want to make with this verse is this. God says you and I, as followers of Christ, have to be different. We're separated. We're different than the world. We're a different kind of people. We just are. We love God, and that's just the way it is. The problem is that God was telling the Israelites, look, I'm going to do something for you. I'm going to get you across this river, but I need you to be wholly devoted to me. And the problem is a lot of times we say to God, God, can you do this for me? But I still want to continue to do what I'm doing. Like, God, can you help me lose weight? But I still eat peanut M&Ms at night before I go to bed. Okay, that's not going to happen, okay? God, can you help me save my marriage? But I don't want to give up that, Facebook guy that I, knew in high school, and we kind of have this, talk on the internet or whatever they do. I don't know what they do, but so my husband's watching. He's like, serious, you know that? Promise, I don't get on Facebook. But some people say, I want good kids, but you don't want to spend time with them, and you clearly don't want to take them to church. How are you going to have good kids? It's kind of like this idea, God, please do this for me, but I don't really want to give up this. And if we're doing stupid sin and doing stupid things, God can't do great things in our life. And this verse says that, look, I want to do great things for you, but I need you to be different. I need you to be separated from everyone else. Look at verse 6. Joshua said to the priests, take up the Ark of the Covenant, pass over before the people, and they took it up and went on before the people. The Lord said to Joshua, "This day I will begin to magnify you in the sight of all of Israel, so that they may know that I was with Moses, so I will be with you." And I love this about God, because suddenly it was this moment. You think Joshua was like a student of Moses. And he was there when Moses, God parted the Red Sea. It's like he puts the staff up and it's like, the Red Sea parts, yay. Now here's Joshua going, I have millions of people following me. What if I get to the end of the Jordan River and I put up my staff and nothing happens? That would be just terrifying. But God says to Joshua before he even starts, he said, "Joshua, as I was with Moses, I promised you that I am going to be with you too." It's a reminder to us that whatever your new normal is, that God's with you. And you need to really grasp a hold of that and remember that as you're going through what you're going through. Even if he's silent, he's not gone. He hasn't left. Somebody just wrote the other day, I read it, the teacher is always silent during tests. I thought that was kind of interesting. Good point. Now, let's go to verse 8. "You shall command the priests who bear the Ark of the Covenant, when you come to the brink of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan." Now, I want to talk to you about the Jordan River, because this is key to our whole lesson today. Because the Jordan River is normally a very, very easy-going river. We've been to Israel twice, baptized in the Jordan River. It was not a raging river. It's like you got in, it was just meandering. It was no problem at all. The word Jordan means to deeply descend. It begins in 3 places in northern Israel. One of the sources is Mount Hermon. It towers 9,300 feet above sea level. It empties into the Dead Sea, which is about 1,300 feet below sea level. So you're talking a river that starts up here and ends up here. So it just meanders whatever in normal time. The problem is, at this particular time in the life of the Israelites where they are, it was April, and it was harvest season. And the Jordan River had snow coming off the mountains, and it was a absolute raging river. And so with the Israelites standing on the side of it, they're like, this is good. How are we getting across? I have no idea how we're going to get across. Look at what it looks like there. Who was it that gave me that picture? Chris Edmondson, onechurch.tv. He took that picture in Israel of the Jordan River. I want you to picture the Israelites on one side, thinking, how in the world are we going to get over there? Now, I have a YouTube video. It's 28 seconds. It terrified me when I saw it. It's called Owl in Asia. I've asked them for permission. I haven't heard back from them, so I'm going to ask forgiveness later if they actually get a hold of me and say no. But here's the deal. I want you, as you're looking at this, to pretend that your children are on one side, your grandchildren, your 1-year-old, you're pregnant, whatever it is, and you're thinking, how in the world am I going to get across there? Okay. Whew. So it's not this little river. It's something so frightening that you're just like, okay, unless you step in God, I'm never, ever going to make it. Now, the interesting thing to me about the Israelites is this. They didn't run away. The older generation ran away. This generation said, no, there's a big old raging river there, but I'm going to trust God that he's going to do something. And I think that's a really good lesson for us, that we know if God doesn't step into our problems, we're going to drown. We don't even know what's going to happen. It's so devastating, whatever's going on in our life. Now look at the next verse. He said, "You shall command the priest who bear the Ark of the Covenant, when you come to the brink of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the water." Joshua said to the Israelites, "Come near. Hear the words of the Lord your God." Joshua said, "Hereby you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will surely drive out before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, and all the people in the other land." Now, here's what I want us to see. If you're here or you're watching us online and you think that God is just some distant God and he doesn't care, that's not true. And this just proves that God is interested in every little thing that happens in your life. And that's the God that we serve. He's a living God. He's not just out there and doesn't care about us. And the thing is that he wants us to do what the Israelites did. Keep going. Even though that looks really scary, I want you to keep going, and I don't want you to run away, and I want you to just keep pushing forward, because sometimes it's easier to retreat and go back to what I used to have, because that just seems a lot easier. God says, no, I don't want you to do that. I want you to know that on the other side of that raging river is the blessing. The land is yours. I'm going to take care of all the people for you, but you got to get across the Jordan first, but that's going to take trusting me to get you through there. Look at the next verse, 11. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is passing over before you into the Jordan. Now take 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. Now, I laughed when I read that. I thought, okay, there was probably a lot of paper, rock, scissors going on in that group. They're probably, no, you go ahead and go. No, you go. Because you see that river and you're like, I don't want to go do that. So one person from each tribe. Verse 13, when the soles of the feet of the priests who bear the ark of the Lord of all the earth shall rest in the Jordan, get a load of what God does. The waters of the Jordan coming down from above shall be cut off and shall stand in a heap. Now, that's what God promised. Like that raging river suddenly is going to stop. And I'm going to take it and I'm going to put it into a heap, and you're never even going to see it. And the thing is that if you were one of like if you're 50 or 60 years old, you would have seen that God parted the Red Sea. So for you, you're just like, yeah, whatever. But a lot of these kids are young, and all they ever did was hear that God was going to, that God parted the Red Sea. And I couldn't figure out why these guys weren't scared. You never see in the Bible that they're nervous about crossing this raging river. And then it dawned on me, and I think this is why it is. I think because they spent the last 40 years with God. They spent 40 years trusting him for everything. Their food, they had no food. God gave them food every day in the form of manna. Every morning they'd walk out and God had given them heavenly food for 40 years of their life. Their shoes never wore out. Their dogs never ate their shoes, okay? But that's just what God did. He always took care of them. They would go to the tabernacle. They'd see the presence of God there. They would see, and they were taught by Moses every day of their life. And for 40 years they said, I just know God. I've seen how he's taken care of me, and you know what? That raging Jordan River, whatever, God will do something. I don't know what, but he's going to do something. And I think that's a lesson for us. The more time we spend getting to know God, the more time we spend reading his word and and reading stories like this and saying, God, I want to know you that well, that when he asks us to go to really scary, scary things, like a sickness or a health crisis or a problem in your marriage or whatever, we're just like, you know what? It's a raging Jordan River. Whatever. God's going to take care of it, because we're not going to be fearful because we know him that well. Now look at verse 14. So when the people set out from their tents to pass over the Jordan, with the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the people, and when those who bore the ark had come to Jordan, and the feet of the priests bearing the ark were in the brink of the water, for the Jordan overflows all its bank through the time of harvest. Somebody actually said that the Jordan, it could have been as large as a football field, raging like that. That's how crazy it is when it gets to that harvest time. But here's what I found really amazing about this whole thing. God did not wait until it was peaceful. Think about that. Like all year long, the stupid river is peaceful and it just meanders. Why in the world did God wait until it was raging like that to send these people across? And I totally believe that it's because that's when we learn the most. That's when we learn the most about God, is when our lives are just absolutely in turmoil. Because think about it. Do you seek God when you have lots of money in the bank and food on the table and kids are good and marriage is good and no problems? Like, I tend to forget about God when that happens. But when there's a raging river, when there's a problem in my marriage and my kids hate me and there's issues with grandchildren, like, I tend to seek God even more. And I think that's why he did it, because those are the times that are raging river flood stages in our lives, and we're forced to turn our eyes on God. And we have to get to the point of saying, God, you're the only hope in my chaotic life at this particular time. I can't solve this problem. I can't do anything. Only you can. Now, God miraculously stepped in. Look what happens on the next verse. Then the waters, which came down from above, stood and rose up in a heap far off at Adam, the city that is beside Zarethan and who's flowing down toward the Sea of Araba, the salt Dead Sea, were wholly cut off. And here is what I learned from a book called Second Guessing God by Brian Jones. First time I ever even heard this. And he said this: God is always working upstream in your life. That's just what he does. And it's one of those things like the Israelites couldn't see it. Like right in front of them, there's this raging, raging river. And yet God was working beyond, out of their sight. They didn't even know what he was doing. 19 miles up, they're like, why did the water stop? But God was working way upstream for something that was going on in their life right then. They could not see it. And I want us to get to the point where we trust God that no matter what is going on in our life, that we say, God, I don't get what's going on, but I know you're working upstream in my life. It's like you apply to a school, and you really want the school, you want them to be accepted. You want to be accepted. But it's one of those things like you're saying, God, if I don't get accepted, or you're working upstream in whoever makes the decision to accept me or reject me. I am trusting you to change their heart where you want me. See, that takes all the pressure off of it. It's like if you apply for the job, the same thing. I really, really want this job. But then you go, God, I want what you want for my life. And would you change the heart of that person upstream? I don't even know what's going on in that office. But would you, if that's the job for me, turn his heart. Work upstream. I can't see what's going on, but you do. And see, I think if we look straight at our problems, the rivers and the problems in our life are terrifying. But I think God gives us this story to remind us that we need to look at our problems and say, God, they're huge and they're exhausting and I'm scared, but I'm going to cross that river and I know that you're going to work upstream to do something in my life because that's what you do. Here's an example, and then I know we got to go. When ministry is a raging river, I will tell you that right now. Because we do what we do, it costs a lot of money to do it and get on all the venues that we do. But about a year ago, I came into Rob and I said, Rob, we have no money to continue. I don't even know what we're going to do. Like, we can't pay our bills and I don't know what's going to happen. That day, a woman called me and she said, hey, let's go to lunch. I was like, okay, let's just catch up. Sits down, she hands me an envelope with a check in it. And I can't even remember, I think it was like $5,000 or something. And I looked at it, and of course I start crying, and I'm like, what is this? And she said, I just sold my house, it just closed, and I decided I wanted to tithe to your ministry. And it was just a reminder to me that God was working up. He knows when we don't have money in our account. Like, he knows that. And so what he does is he works upstream. I can't see it. I had no idea that she had a house for sale. I had no idea it would close 2 days before we needed the money. And I had no idea that God would put on her heart to invest in our ministry. But see, that's the God that we serve. And that's what's so exciting about being a Christian and knowing that it's like, God, I don't have to worry about my life. I don't have to worry about the raging rivers because you love me so much that you're such a personal God to me. You care about every little detail in my life. That's really, really good news to me. Okay, yes, woo, love God for that. Okay, 2 minutes. All right, almost done. I'll tell you one last thing. For those of you that have been here, you know this story because I tell it all the time. I wish I could tell it every single week because it was so powerful in my life, but it was the same exact thing. We had a business deal. We had by Friday, or Monday, we had to pay a big bill. Didn't know how we were going to do it. Friday night, we knew we had to shut our business down. We did not know what to do. Went to bed Friday night. Saturday morning, we got an email from a woman who said, God, I was walking through my house last night. God stopped me, said, I want you to invest this particular amount of money into this business. And she said, I was like, what? And she goes, literally, the amount of money went right across my eyes. And she was like, well, that's kind of a lot of money. She said it went right across her eyes again. She wrote us an email and said, God spoke to me last night and told me that he needed to invest in your business. We woke up and see, that's a raging river on Friday. And yet God was working upstream. We were sound asleep. We didn't even know what he was doing. But he was working on our behalf because we're his children. And see, there's something really exciting about knowing that. And the other thing I learned, and I'll say this really quick, is that God did not stop this Jordan River 3 days before when he said, hey, you got 3 days to cross. He never gave him time to think about it because God always waits to the last minute. And I don't even know if you're allowed to say that sucks in Bible study, but that sucks, okay? I'm always like, seriously, God, why do you wait till the last minute? We had this I'll give you my last story and then we'll go. We had this deal with a bank. And it was a long, involved process. We've been praying that God would get us released from this one situation. And the bank called us and said, we will release you from this, but you have to come up with this amount of money in like 5 days. It's Monday. We have to have it by Friday. We have no idea. We have no money. We're like, I don't know where we're going to get this money. Driving along, and I'm like, God, what are we going to do? My phone rings. Someone, I don't talk to this person very often. He calls and he's like, hey, the Lord put you upon my heart this morning. And what do you need? And so, of course, you have that pride. Oh, nothing. Everything's fine. We're fine. Everything's great. I should have looked at it like it was from God. But I didn't. I was like, oh, no, we're good. And at the very end of the conversation, he said, no, really. He said, God does not put you on my heart like this unless you need something. Tell me what you need. I said, we need money. and I said, well, we could pay you back in like 2 months, but we need it, He said, great. He went, put the money in our account, got it all handled, and everything was good. Because that's God, okay? And I just love that he always waits to the last minute. Like, I don't know why he does that, but I think he does it because he wants us to get to the point of saying, God, I can't do it on my own, and I'm trusting you because that's impossible. So here's our 3 points. God changes minds and hearts. Always remember that because that's really important for us to know. The second point was the Old Testament always points to Jesus. As you're reading through it, look for those things. It's kind of exciting and interesting. And never forget that God is always working upstream in your life and mine because he loves us. We're his children. That's his job. And what an awesome way to live. God, thank you for your word. Thank you for this Jordan River story. I pray that we walk out of here, God, so less stressed with life, knowing that whatever Jordan River we're facing, as raging as it feels, that God, you're doing something. And for those out there that are still waiting for you to change the hearts and change the situation, God, help them to know that it's just not ready yet, that you're doing something in our lives and you're just not ready to release us yet because you still want to use us. God, help us to get that. It makes life so much simpler. Thank you for loving us. Jesus, thank you for all you do. In your name, amen. They are caring more about punching holes in the darkness than they are them. My life is his. I have committed my life to him to use me any way he pleases in order to make his name great. That's suffering for Jesus. And he's saying that is what is the norm in this kingdom of what is it that makes you cry or happy or sad or miserable? What is it that every single one of these men were discouraged in their life, but they did something that I want